The two largest ship classes in the Second World War were battleships and aircraft carriers. Both were extremely powerful, but had their distinct strengths and weaknesses. But in 1943, the Imperial Japanese Navy attempted to answer a question which few had asked for more than 2 decades. Could one ship try and do both? The Japanese attempt at answering this question was the IJN Ise and Hyuga, a pair of World War I era battleships that were converted in 1943 into a hybrid battleship carrier arrangement. Now, it turns out that Japan was not the first to produce a ship with both big guns and a flight deck. 25 years earlier, in the very early years of carrier aviation, the Royal Navy had tried a similar arrangement on HMS Furious, pairing a flight deck in the front with a single massive 18-inch gun on the back. It was on this ship that the first ever landing on a moving ship was made on August 2nd, 1917 by Squadron Commander Edwin Dunning. This was no mean feat, since to land on Furious's flight deck required the pilot to approach from behind the ship and manoeuvre around the ship's superstructure in the last few seconds before touching down. As you might imagine, this was incredibly dangerous, and only 2 successful landings were managed before Dunning was killed on his 3rd run. This version of Furious was quickly abandoned in November that year, replaced by an arguably even crazier design which got rid of the gun entirely and provided for separate landing and flying off decks, joined together by small taxiways, and still with the ship's massive superstructure right in the middle of both decks. After the end of the First World War, Furious would undergo another refit, eventually reappearing with what we would see as a conventional aircraft carrier layout, with a single flight deck running the length of the ship. The concept of combining aircraft operations with large caliber guns on the same ship appeared to have been roundly rejected, with no other navies opting to try it out. Until, that is, 1943. With the war situation going downhill fast and the Imperial Japanese Navy suffering from a lack of aircraft carriers on account of them being sunk too quickly, the Japanese Navy decided to give the concept a go. Ise and Hyuga's redesign differed in a few important respects from Furious's version of a dual-purpose ship. For starters, the flight deck was on the stern, replacing the 2 rearmost gun turrets and leaving the 2 ships still with a formidable arsenal of 8 14-inch guns. This had the great advantage of not requiring every pilot approaching the ship to take avoiding action of its own superstructure on approach. But in fact, this didn't matter because Ise's flight deck wasn't long enough for 1940s carrier aircraft to land on anyway. A hangar with enough space for 20 dive bombers had been created below decks with 2 steam catapults installed for flying them off, but there was no way of getting them back on deck, so Ise's contribution to any air raid would be a one-time deal, with aircraft having to make their way to another nearby carrier or land airbase to land at, or the sortie would be a one-way trip. The 2 battleship carriers entered service at the start of May 1944, assigned to Carrier Division 4, but they were tragically immediate victims of Japan's crippling shortage of aircraft, with none available to equip them. Both ships saw no action until Leyte Gulf in October, when they were deployed, still without any combat aircraft, as part of Admiral Ozawa's Northern Force that came under heavy air attack on October 25th. Neither hybrid ship was sunk, though Ise reported as many as 30 near misses. With the Japanese fleet devastated during this battle, the 2 ships then spent time based at Singapore before being recalled to the home islands in February 1945. Both ships were moored outside Kure Harbour to supplement its anti-aircraft defences, with shortages of fuel, aircraft and pilots making any hope of deploying in their intended role impossible. It was there they each fell victim to the dominance of US aircraft, with Hyuga hit by bombs on March 19th and Ise being struck by 11 bombs on July 28th. Both sunk in shallow water and were scrapped after the war's end. Such was the fate of the only battleship carriers ever operationally deployed during wartime. The dream of a ship that could combine air power with powerful surface-to-surface weapons, though, did not entirely die here. During the Cold War, the Soviet Kiev-class aircraft carriers mounted anti-ship missiles on the front of its flight deck. And in 1979, there was a radical suggestion in the United States that the Iowa-class battleship should be reconfigured to feature a flight deck on the stern for the operation of V-STOL aircraft. This would convert the old battleships into a kind of assault ship, able to deploy local air power, operate helicopters, and provide shore bombardment support. But this idea was never taken up, meaning Issa and Hyuga remain the only proper members of a completely unique class of ship. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.